Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the importance of rotating movements that we are stalling on. Now, this is going to be kind of a separate topic from my conjugate lifts that I talk about with max effort work, because we know that's the case. We know that as a general rule for max effort lifts, we do not want to hit a movement pattern or an exact exercise, I should say, that we cannot PR on. In other words, if you deadlift 500 pounds on a normal conventional deadlift, we don't want to ever touch that exercise again until you can deadlift 505 or 510. We would never, ever, ever do it again. There would be no point because we want to PR every single time that we hit a max lift. And if that means we have to have 16 different deadlifts in our rotation in order to achieve that, that's what we do. And we know that psychologically this matters a lot. So there's a reason we use the different blocks and deficits and chains and bands and ranges of motion and everything else that we do, right? There's a reason for that. And part of it is psychological. Part of it is psychological, and it has to do with the specificity of learning to groove new lifts all the time and take anything that's thrown at you to a 1 rep max, even a movement you've never done before. But when it comes to our supplemental work, there is a certain amount of psychology involved with the same concept. And you guys have seen me do it myself, and I'm actually doing stuff in 3-week waves, but we could easily change it to where every time I stalled on a lift, I change exercises. And examples that you guys are going to see rotating through here is stuff like me doing a closed grip bench press. Actually, I'd been doing it with a buffalo bar. Then when it stalled, I went to the normal bar and did closed grip benching. Right, got PR after PR after PR, and when I stalled and I missed a set, what happened? Right, when I went to 250 and I got stuck with 9 reps, which I had already done 247 and a half for 3 sets of 10, what did I do? I switched over to the floor press, and you guys saw there that first set of floor pressing that I did coming back over to it. Replaced it for a floor press. Did 230 for sets of 10, and I'll progress on that. When that stalls, I'll switch to a different bar. But I'll probably do it in 3-week waves and just try to push it as hard as I can. But we could alternatively just every time something stalls, swap it out. Same thing. You guys see me over here doing good mornings with the normal bar. Well, I trained them with a safety squat bar for quite a while. And I got up to 225 for 3 sets of 10. And then when I went for 230, I failed the 10th rep on the final set. And then I said, well, it's time to switch barbells. We need a different movement. We can't be stalling. We can't be stalling. And there's a lot of ways we could approach this. I approach it different ways with my different lifters depending on how they're built, how they respond to things. Like, for example, my lifters who respond really well to high volume, because that varies from person to person. I have lifters who respond really well to low volume. Like, I've got a guy right now who we've put over 30 pounds on his bench press, broke past 300, and all he does is close grip benching and tricep work and speed bench. Okay, that's all he does for his bench. And he doesn't do a lot of volume. I have other guys where we do tons of supplemental pressing. Right? Tons of chest work, incline and floor press and dumbbell presses and everything else. Who's at a similar overall strength level, but he responds really well to high volume. So when you have someone like that, one of the things that we oftentimes do is run a 3-week wave to where you increase volume on that lift and then you get rid of it. What do I mean? So you might do 3 sets of 10 with a challenging weight for 3 sets of 10. Next week in the wave, you go to 4 sets of 10. The third week, you go to 5 sets of 10. And you try to replicate that same weight you've been doing. So in this case, you progress on volume, right? We do 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. And you'll do a lot of them twice a week because you're going to have an upper lower. And that's one thing that you can do. And so you push the actual volume up for 3 weeks. And that works really, really well for lifters who respond to a lot of volume, because you're using that as a loading parameter for them for progressive overload. And then you get rid of the lift. So if they've been doing a close grip bench press, you might take it to a flat dumbbell press or a floor press or an incline bench or whatever it is that they need. Okay? That's what we would do with it. We would run it through a wave progression of increasing volume so that they're always progressing on it. And then 3 weeks, you get rid of it, swap it for something else. Some of my guys, as soon as they just stall on a lift, I change it for something else. If I got a guy who's doing hip thrusts and he stalls on his hip thrusts, I'll throw glute bridges in there. Okay? We have options. We have options. I have a guy who works better with lower volumes and he stalls on his good mornings. I might have him do a 3-week wave of Romanian deadlifts. Not that I do that for most of my people. I'm not a big fan of the Romanian deadlift. But if the person doesn't have different barbells and they're on a little bit lower volume of an approach, perfectly viable. Just swap it out. As soon as they stall. When they stall on that, you take them back to good mornings. Or we change something in the movement. We find some variation so that the person stops stalling. We go to something that they can progress on. Now, physiologically, the argument could be made that does that really matter? Because if the sets are challenging, they're getting muscle growth, right? If they're challenging, aren't they still stimulating hypertrophy? I mean, if they're getting quality reps or getting, within 1 rep of failure, maybe hitting failure, especially on the last set or 3 sets to failure around 10, 12 reps or whatever you're doing, that's always going to stimulate muscle growth. Why do we need to change the lift? Well, you're looking purely at physiology. And I'm looking at psychology, and I'm also looking at overuse. Number one, let's talk about overuse. What is considered to be based upon our current injury model of training? What's our biggest concern for injuries? Overuse, not bad form. Not 1 rep maxes. Okay? It is overuse injuries. That seems to be arguably, other than just technique that puts us in bad joint positions for our structure, things like impingement and stuff, that's different. Straight overuse injuries. Well, if we're just hammering the same movement over and over and over with no variation for a lot of work, what happens? Well, that's where you get overuse injuries. By switching it up when it starts to get challenging and we're pushing the bleeding edge, because if we're not progressing anymore, we're definitely pushing our limits. Right? If you're doing 3 sets of 10 or 5 sets of 10 on a movement and you can't add any weight to the bar after a couple of weeks on the same reps and sets, and you're hitting failure, you're at your bleeding edge. You're pushing that movement as hard as you can and probably with a fair amount of volume. Okay? You're probably stimulating really good adaptation from it, but you're at a higher risk of overuse if you continue to do that. If you just swap the movement over, our concern goes away, doesn't it? Our concern goes away. Because we're hitting different movement patterns, and if we do it every time that we stall, our risk of overuse starts to go down, even when we're pushing the limits. Okay, so let's come over and talk about psychology. If I take you and push you on one variation of a movement really hard for 3 weeks and you're failing and you're not progressing anymore, and I switch you to a different one and you start pushing it hard too, right? Like 1 rep in reserve, things like that, or hitting failure, aren't we stimulating just as much physiological adaptation? Sure we are. We could argue you might need the first workout to dial in the movement pattern, but you're still getting a training response. But what does it do mentally and psychologically? It keeps us fresh. Okay, staleness is a big deal in lifters. That's what they used to call it in the old Russian text, staleness. It's a big deal. And that's when we're dealing with serious athletes. What happens when you're dealing with people who are general population just trying to get stronger? They're going to be even more hammered by those psychological factors. Right? If you change exercises when you stall, you're now back to making progress again. You're doing something new. You're doing something fresh. You're progressing. And when you are making progress week to week on movements, what does that do for your motivation? Makes you more motivated. If it makes you more motivated, you're going to have better workouts because you're going to come to each workout more enthusiastic. And I'm not trying to discount my point about motivation versus discipline and habits, but it's still a factor. you will train harder. You will look forward to your workouts more because you see progress on the bar, even if it's kind of a trick. There was my failed rep, by the way. That was a missed rep. Turned it into a squat. But if you're fresh and you're seeing progress on a new movement, you tend to be more motivated. You're going to put more effort into everything. You're going to train harder. Okay, you're going to get better results from it. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.